Okay, so you ever like walking home a little later than usual and suddenly that street, like the back of your hand just feels different?
Oh, totally. It's like our senses are on high alert, right?
Exactly. And every shadow is like hiding something.
Yeah, it's like our brain's kind of hardwired to look for threats, especially when we're feeling a little vulnerable.
Makes sense. That's like a survival instinct or something.
Exactly. And that's the vibe I got from this story we're diving into today, except it's like that uneasy feeling times 100.
Yeah, this one's intense. So we've got Alfea just strolling home, minding her own business.
Which I feel like is how most of these stories start, right?
Right. Like, bam, out of nowhere.
Totally.
Yeah.
And she stumbles across this scene at an old warehouse.
That would make anyone think twice,
Oh, for sure. It's like the author sets it up so we experience that shift with Alfea. She's on a route. She knows everything feels normal.
Comfortable, even.
Right. And then, bam, everything changes. She's confronted with this total unknown.
And it's creepy, too. It's not just like, oh, a weird noise. It's a group of people all huddled around something.
But they're not doing anything.
Yeah, exactly. No movement. No sound. Just eerie silence.
And that silence, man, that's what gets you. It's like screaming danger even though nothing's being said.
Right. You just know instinctively that something is very wrong.
100%.
Yeah.
And poor Alfea, she's stuck in this awful situation.
Right in the thick of it. So does she run?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? Part of her wants to get out of there as fast as possible.
Which, can you blame her?
Not at all. It's that fight or flight response kicking in. Her body's pumping adrenaline, telling her to escape.
Totally. But then there's this other side of it, right?
Exactly. It's like her conscience is saying, hold on, you have to do something.
Right. It's that internal tug of war.
Between self-preservation and this sense of like, what do we owe to other people, even strangers in trouble?
That's the million-dollar question for sure. Because it's not like Alfea signed up for this.
No, she's not some superhero with a plan.
She's just a regular person who suddenly walked into a really messed up situation.
And that's what makes it so relatable. We've all been there.
Maybe not to this extreme.
Right. But that moment when you see something wrong and you have to decide, do I step in or look away?
It's heavy stuff. It reminds me of that Spider-Man quote, with great power.
Comes great responsibility.
But even without superpowers, just seeing something like that puts you in this weird moral gray area.
Totally. And there's a name for that. The bystander effect.
The what now?
The bystander effect.
Yeah.
Basically, it means the more people present during an emergency.
You'd think there'd be more people to help, right?
You'd think so.
Yeah.
But actually, it's the opposite. The more people there are, the less likely anyone is to take action.
Seriously. Why?
It's kind of wild, right? But there's this thing called diffusion of responsibility.
Okay, that sounds complicated.
It's not as bad as it sounds.
Yeah.
Basically, everyone in the group thinks someone else will handle it.
So no one does anything.
Exactly. Plus, in Alfea's case, there's that fear of personal risk.
Right. Getting involved could make her a target, too.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So she's dealing with fear, this bystander effect, and this moral dilemma all at the same time.
So what does she do? Does she just freeze up?
Well, this is where the story gets really interesting. Despite being absolutely terrified, Alfea makes a choice.
She doesn't just run.
No, she doesn't.
She decides to actually call for help.
Which, you're thinking, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. It's like the obvious choice.
But hold on a sec. Let's put ourselves in Alfea's shoes for a minute.
Okay, so she's alone in the dark.
Right, it's middle of the night.
And there's a good chance that whoever's in that warehouse
could be dangerous.
Like, seriously dangerous.
So even though calling for help seems like a small thing,
it's huge. It's a massive decision in this moment.
For sure. It takes guts to not just listen to that animal instinct to run away.
Totally. And this is what gets me. It's like the difference between knowing what's right and then actually doing it. It's easy for us to sit here and say, oh yeah, I'd be brave.
Right. Like we'd all be heroes. Exactly. But fear is real.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine trying to think straight when your heart's racing like that.
Oh yeah. Your heart's probably about to beat out of your chest.
Seriously. But okay, here's what gets me. The story mentions that when she calls for help, her voice is just this tiny whisper.
Oh, wow.
Like even her voice is scared.
Oh, man, that little detail. That says so much.
It's like you can hear the fear in her voice.
It shows you how much effort it took for her to do that. She's not some fearless hero, Right. She's acting despite being terrified.
Yeah.
And that's real courage.
It's like that saying, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing something even when you're afraid.
Exactly. And it's interesting. There's actually a psychological thing about this.
What do you mean?
Studies have shown that even these small acts of courage, they can actually inspire other people to step up too.
You mean like seeing someone else be brave can make you braver?
Totally. It's like a ripple effect. you
Yeah.
know?
Wow. So by Althea making that call, even though it was terrifying,
She might have started something even bigger than herself.
that's kind of amazing when you think about it.
Right. We often think like, oh, my actions don't really matter. But even small acts of like defiance or courage can make a difference.
Okay, so Althea makes the call. Does that mean, like, is it a happy ending?
Well, that's the thing.
Yeah.
The story doesn't really tell us what happens next.
What do you mean?
It ends with Althea slipping away from the warehouse. But she has this feeling like she's being watched.
Ooh, that's creepy. It's like, even though she did what she thought was right,
Yeah.
there's still this sense of unease. Like, she can't just shake off what she saw.
Right. And that's the power of the story. It leaves us with this feeling that things are different for Althea now.
Like, that whole experience really messed with her.
For sure. It makes you question everything you know, like your safety, your place in the world, even your own capacity for good and evil.
It's like that saying, seeing is believing. Once you see something like that, you can't unsee it.
And that's a heavy thing to carry around.
It's intense, you know? Like, we talk about all this stuff, but the story makes it real.
Oh, totally. It's like you're right there with her, feeling that fear, that uncertainty.
Exactly. It's not just some theory anymore. It's like, okay, this is what it actually feels like to be in that situation.
And that's what's so powerful about storytelling, right? It lets us explore these big ideas.
Like the bystander effect or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. But in a way that feels personal and real.
For sure.
Um.
And even though it's fiction, it still makes you think, like, what would I have done?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Have you ever been in a situation like that?
Right.
Where you had to decide whether to get involved?
Maybe not that intense, but yeah, I've definitely had moments where I saw something happening.
Right, like maybe it wasn't a life or death situation.
Exactly. But it still made you think, like, what's the right thing to do here?
Totally. Those smaller moments, they're still important. They test our values just as much as those big dramatic ones.
It's like they say, character is what you do when no one's watching.
But sometimes doing the right thing means being seen.
Yeah.
You know, taking a stand even when it's hard.
And that's what Althea did. She didn't ask for this situation, but she faced it head on.
And that takes a lot of courage.
More courage than I think I have sometimes. But it's inspiring, you know. It reminds us that we all have that capacity within us.
Exactly. We can all choose to act even when we're scared. And those actions, they matter.
Even the small ones.
Especially the small ones. Sometimes the whisper can be more powerful than a shout.
That's a good way to put it. So to everyone listening, next time you're faced with a situation that makes you question what's right,
Remember Althea's story.
remember that courage can be quiet, and that even the smallest act of bravery can make a difference,
And maybe, just maybe, those small acts will inspire others to do the same.
creating a ripple effect.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe those ripples will turn into a wave of change, making the world a little brighter, a little braver.
I like that. A wave of change. On that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive for today.
Until next time.